Chinese tech giant Huawei's sub-brand Honor has just launched its new flagship smartphones in London. Now, the unveiling of the Honor 20 series comes amid the concerns about the U.S. trade restrictions against Huawei. The Honor 20 joins a range of smartphones and tablets by the Chinese tech giant that won't have access to updates on Google's Android operating system and apps after a temporary license expires in August. It comes after Google announced on Sunday that it would comply with a U.S. order to stop supplying Huawei with its services. Let's cross over now to our London correspondent, Natalie Powell, who's been keeping an eye on this launch for us. Natalie, very soon any new Huawei smartphones, they won't have access to Android updates or Google services. What's that going to look like?
Yeah, well, we'll have to specify that overnight it's not going to be a case that Huawei phone users won't be able to download apps or access Google services. And in fact, this Honor 20 series, those that are already on the market, will also be able to access those services. And that's because these phones have already been certified using two mechanisms called the Compatibility Test Suite process and the Vendor Test Suite. So phones in the market currently have those certifications and therefore are able to use these services. Of course, the big problem will come when it comes to security. We know at the moment what happens is that if Google discovers vulnerabilities in its apps and services, it informs Android makers about a month in advance of informing the public. It won't be doing that with Huawei, and Huawei will be playing catch-up, therefore, when it comes to security. Huawei, interestingly, have already come back at that, saying, of course, it will be offering security updates. Other issues could potentially be the fact that when it comes to the Android operating system, well, Huawei will not be offered any updates to that. But really the big problem here lies when it comes to new phones, those phones that won't have been certified. They will not be able to carry these Google services, and therefore gone are the days of using things like Google Maps, Gmail, even the YouTube app on, of course, these Huawei phones. So big issues ahead for Huawei when it comes to this. Now, one thing that is being suggested is that Huawei could potentially provide its own operating service. But what we're hearing from tech fanatics on the ground here is that they're a bit concerned over that. Huawei is known as being a good handset maker, but not so much for its software capabilities. So whether a Huawei operating system is really going to match its rivals is something that really will have to be seen.
Natalie, the UK's recent decision to give Huawei limited access to its 5G network, could the US blacklist have any impact on that?
Well, what we know so far on this is through government leaks. Government leaks here have suggested that the UK is likely to use Huawei infrastructure in its non-sensitive 5G network rollout. And what that means, we're not entirely sure of the details because that is an unofficial announcement. At the moment, we are waiting on an official announcement from the government. There is a lot of speculation here in the UK at the moment that that announcement won't come until after a presidential visit by Donald Trump, which is scheduled, of course, for the very first week of June. But what we are hearing from government officials is that they are looking into this themselves, that they aren't being influenced by the US. They are carrying out their own investigations, and it will be from the judgment of those investigations is what really will sway them, as opposed to being lent on by the US and trying to and persuaded essentially by the US to do a similar kind of thing that we've seen in the US. One of the big issues may occur, however, is in terms of whether any of Huawei's goods are manufactured in the US, any of those components that are used in its 5G infrastructure. Of course, if that is manufactured in the US, that is going to cause a problem down the line and into the marketplace. So another thing for the UK government there to consider.
Certainly continuing challenges there for Huawei. Natalie, thank you very much for that. Natalie Powell there in London. Well, in Singapore, experts do not expect major short-term problems for Huawei when it comes to their smartphones, despite Google's move to ban the devices from using its Android operating system. However, they flagged potential long-term issues in security and operating systems, for example. Faraz Juraimi tells us more.
Months ago, people were raving about the P30, Huawei's crown jewel. Despite a zoom capability of up to 50 times, they couldn't see what was about to unfold. Uncertainty now looms for the Chinese tech giant, with the company on the Trump administration's blacklist. Experts don't expect immediate issues, as Google says the ban will not affect existing devices. Users will still be able to access the Google Play Store and update apps, but there might be future issues, like insecurity.
The idea we seem to get is that Google will stop providing patches for security, for example, to the Android operating system for the phone. So all the Huawei phones will become vulnerable. But then again, we believe that Huawei will be researching and building their own security patches to allow the users to download and continue to be safe.
And when it comes to OS compatibility,
the latest, newest Android phones from next year onwards might be running a different operating system or might be running a forked version of Android, depending on what happens. So that may actually affect the consumer's choice, whether they want to choose this phone or they want to choose other phones instead with a tried, tested and well-known operating system compared to maybe the new operating system that Huawei might be using.
Maybe if Huawei have their own app store, then maybe that's okay.
Actually, I'm using a Huawei phone right now, so I think by the time I can always switch to other phone manufacturers.
I went into a few mobile phone outlets selling Huawei phones and asked the salespersons there if they've received questions on the Google ban. At Singtel and M1, they said they haven't received much queries. They also said that there isn't any problems with Huawei phones. At StarHub, it's more or less the same story. However, their salesperson told me that I should purchase phones of other brands instead. And when I went into Huawei, I was told that I would receive a 2-year warranty with every phone purchase. However, their salesperson couldn't tell me if that guarantees a phone replacement. CNA reached out to the local telcos, but they did not disclose how many Huawei handsets have been sold.